The forest moon hung in the sky like a green jewel against the darkness of space. Jake Morrison stood at the edge of the research camp and looked up at the stars he didn't recognize. 3 weeks on Kepler 442b, and he still couldn't get used to how different the night sky looked from this far away from Earth. Behind him, the portable research station hummed quietly. His team was inside, probably going over the day's data one more time before bed. Amy Walsh would be checking the shuttle systems like she always did. Peter Grant would be cataloging plant samples with that excited smile he got whenever he found something new. Linda Hayes would be running security protocols, making sure the perimeter sensors were working properly. Jake was supposed to be with them. That was standard procedure. The team stayed together at night, safe inside the research station's walls. But this was their last night on the moon. Tomorrow, the orbital ship would send down a transport to pick them up. Their survey mission would be complete. He wanted one more night in the field. One more chance to see what the forest did when humans weren't watching. The moon's ecosystem had surprised everyone. When they first arrived, Command expected a lifeless rock, or maybe some basic bacterial colonies. Instead, they found forests. Real forests with trees that reached 100 meters into the sky, their bark smooth and purple in the daylight. They found creatures that looked almost like earth birds, flying between branches on rainbow-colored wings. They found streams full of fish-like animals that scattered when shadows passed overhead. But the wildlife was shy, timid. In 3 weeks, nothing larger than a rabbit-sized creature had come within 50 meters of any human. The hidden cameras they set up caught footage of larger animals, things with 4 legs and graceful movements, but always at a distance, always watching from far away. Jake wanted to know why. He wanted to understand what these creatures thought of the strange beings who had landed on their world in ships that fell from the sky. "You sure about this?" Amy's voice came from behind him. She walked up carrying a small pack, her short blonde hair pulled back in its usual ponytail. "Command's not going to be happy if something happens to you out there." "Nothing's going to happen," Jake said. He took the pack from her. Inside would be emergency supplies. A beacon. Probably extra ration bars that he wouldn't eat. "Everything on this moon runs away from us. I'll be safer out there than I am crossing the street back home." "It's your funeral," Amy said. But she was smiling. "Though Peter made me promise to tell you to record everything. He thinks you might see the nocturnal species he's been theorizing about. The big ones from the camera footage? Yeah. He thinks they only come out at night because they're avoiding us during the day." Amy handed him a small data pad. He loaded this, with all the camera recordings from Sector 7. "That's where you're heading, right?" Jake nodded. Sector 7 was a clearing about 2 kilometers from base camp. Perfect distance, close enough that he could hike back quickly if needed, far enough that the animals might not associate the area with human presence. "I'll be fine," he said again. "Set up my tent, watch some recordings, maybe see something interesting. I'll be back before breakfast." Amy didn't look convinced, but she didn't argue. That was one of the things Jake liked about his team. They trusted each other. They'd been working together for 6 months now, through 2 other survey missions before this one. They knew how each other thought. "Linda's not happy," Amy added. "She wanted to come with you. I told her you'd probably just stare at trees all night and bore her to death." "Probably accurate," Jake admitted. He shouldered the pack. His own gear was already loaded in a small hover cart, the kind survey teams use to haul equipment through rough terrain. A tent, sleeping bag, portable sensors, his sidearm. Basic stuff. He said goodbye to the others and started the hike to Sector 7. The moon had 2 small suns, both of them setting now in shades of orange and purple. The forest smelled like cinnamon and rain, even though it hadn't rained in days. That was another mystery Peter wanted to solve. Some kind of pheromone release from the trees, maybe. The path Jake followed wasn't really a path. Just a route through the trees that the team had walked enough times to make easier. The purple bark felt warm when he brushed against it. The trees themselves were massive, their trunks wide enough that 3 people holding hands couldn't circle them. Above him, The flying creatures settled into their nests for the night. They made soft, cooing sounds, like doves back on Earth. Jake wondered if they dreamed, if they had families, if they understood what stars were. Sector 7 came into view as the last sun dipped below the horizon. The clearing was exactly as they'd left it 3 days ago. Flat ground covered in moss-like growth that glowed faintly blue in the darkness. The hidden cameras were still in place, mounted on trees at the clearing's edge, their small red lights blinking steadily. Jake set up his tent in the center of the clearing. It was a simple structure. Lightweight fabric stretched over flexible poles. The kind of thing that could be packed up in 30 seconds if he needed to run. Not that he would need to run. Everything here was afraid of humans. Inside the tent, he spread out his sleeping bag and activated a small light sphere. It cast a warm glow. Enough to see by, but not enough to ruin his night vision completely. He pulled out the datapad Amy had given him and started reviewing Peter's camera footage. Hours passed. Jake watched dozens of recordings. The nocturnal animals Peter had theorized about did exist. They were beautiful, tall, graceful creatures that moved through the forest on 4 legs. Their bodies were covered in scales that seemed to catch and reflect moonlight. Some of them had patterns that glowed softly, like bioluminescent deep-sea fish from Earth, but they never came close to the cameras. They moved through the distant background of shots, barely visible even with enhancement. Shy. Always shy. Jake found himself yawning. The adrenaline of hiking out here was wearing off, replaced by the comfortable tiredness of a long day. Outside, the moon's night sounds created a gentle symphony, chirping insects that weren't really insects. The whisper of wind through purple leaves. That cooing from the bird-like creatures. He set the datapad aside and stretched out in his sleeping bag. Through the tent's translucent fabric, he could see the stars. So many stars. More than anyone on Earth could see, even on the clearest night. Because there was no light pollution here. Just darkness and distance, and the cold fire of distant suns. His eyes grew heavy. He thought about tomorrow. The transport coming down, loading all their equipment. The long journey back to the orbital station, then the longer journey back to Earth. Months in space, sleeping in cryo, while the ship covered impossible distances. He thought about this clearing. This peaceful place that would return to silence once the humans left. Would the shy creatures come here once the scent of people faded? Would they wonder what the strange visitors had been looking for? Jake's hand rested on his sidearm, more from habit than fear. Security training. Always know where your weapon is. Always be ready. But he wasn't afraid. This moon had shown them nothing but beauty and peace. Whatever intelligence lived here, if any lived here at all, it wanted nothing to do with humanity. That was fine. Crust and taw. Crust and taw. Crust and taw. The universe was big enough for everyone to have their own space. His breathing slowed. Sleep crept over him like a warm blanket. The last thing he remembered was the gentle rhythm of his own heartbeat and the soft glow of the moss outside his tent. Then there was darkness. Deep, dreamless sleep. He had no idea how long he slept. Time lost meaning in the darkness. But something pulled him back to consciousness. Not a sound. Not exactly. More like a feeling. A change in the air pressure. A warmth that hadn't been there before. Jake's eyes opened slowly. The tent was still dark, but not completely black. Dawn must be close. That faint pre-morning light was starting to filter through the fabric. He tried to sit up and couldn't move. There was something on his chest, something heavy, something warm. His heart, which had been beating slowly with sleep, suddenly hammered in his chest. His hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm, the movement automatic from years of training. His fingers touched something smooth, plated, like armor, but organic. Warm armor that rose and fell with breathing that wasn't his own. And then he felt the rumbling. Deep, rhythmic. A sound so low it was almost below hearing, but he felt it in his bones. It vibrated through his entire body, starting from whatever massive thing was pressed against his chest. Jake froze. Every muscle in his body locked tight. His mind raced through possibilities. One of the large animals from the footage? But they were afraid of humans. They ran away. They never approached. The rumbling continued. Steady. Not aggressive. Almost like purring. Light was growing stronger outside. Jake could see more details now. The thing on his chest was big. Very big. He could see scales, iridescent in the growing light, shifting colors like oil on water. Purple, silver, deep blue. He could feel the weight of it. Easily 3 times his own weight. Maybe more. If it wanted to hurt him, he'd already be dead. If it wanted to eat him, it would have done so while he slept. But it hadn't. It was just lying there, on top of him, rumbling with that strange, almost soothing vibration. Jake's training screamed at him to do something. Activate his emergency beacon. Reach for his weapon. Shout for help. But another part of him, the part that had spent 3 weeks watching this moon's creatures from a distance, told him to wait, to observe, to understand, before reacting. His breathing started to slow. His heart rate began to drop from panic levels to something more manageable. The rumbling on his chest seemed to match the change, becoming slightly softer, slightly more rhythmic. Whatever this thing was, it was aware of him. Jake lay very still and waited for the sun to rise. The dawn came slowly on the forest moon. Light filtered through the tent fabric in shades of purple and gold as the twin suns began their climb over the horizon. Jake watched the illumination grow stronger, revealing more and more of the creature that had somehow entered his tent during the night and decided to sleep on top of him. She was magnificent. That was the first word that came to Jake's mind, and somehow he knew without question that the creature was female. She lay curled against him, her massive body arranged almost protectively around his smaller human frame. Her head rested directly on his chest, and that deep rumbling sound came from somewhere inside her torso, vibrating through both their bodies. Her scales caught the morning light and threw it back in shifting patterns. Jake could see them clearly now. Each scale was roughly the size of his palm, perfectly smooth, and they overlapped like armor plating. The colors shifted as she breathed, purple to silver to deep violet to a blue so dark it was almost black. Her head was massive, easily the size of Jake's entire torso, but the shape was elegant, almost delicate, despite its size. She had large eyes, and when she finally opened them, Jake felt his breath catch. They were compound eyes, like a dragonfly's from Earth, but somehow expressive in a way insect eyes never were. Hundreds of tiny facets caught the light, and behind them Jake could see intelligence. Real, unmistakable intelligence. She was looking at him, watching him, studying him, the same way he was studying her. Jake's hand, which had frozen halfway to his sidearm hours ago, slowly relaxed. He could feel his weapon pressing against his hip under the sleeping bag. He could probably reach it if he moved fast, probably. But what would be the point? She could crush him before he even drew the weapon. And more importantly, she hadn't hurt him, hadn't threatened him. She was just there. The rumbling changed pitch slightly. It became almost musical, rising and falling in gentle waves. Was she talking? Communicating, somehow? Jake's emergency beacon was clipped to his belt, within reach of his other hand. He'd activated it during the night with his foot, he remembered. Just a slight pressure against the switch. A silent distress signal that would alert his team without making any noise that might startle the creature. His team should have gotten the signal hours ago. Why hadn't they come? Were they on their way? Were they waiting outside? As if in answer to his thoughts, his comm unit crackled softly. The sound made the creature's eyes shift, To focus on the small device attached to Jake's collar, she made a soft, chittering noise, curious but not alarmed. "Jake?" Amy's voice was barely a whisper, tense and controlled. "Jake, can you hear me? Don't move suddenly. Don't speak if you can't do it safely. Just tap your comm twice if you're alive." Jake slowly lifted one finger and tapped the comm unit twice. The movement made the creature shift slightly, adjusting her weight. But she didn't pull away. There was a long pause. Jake could almost hear Amy's relief through the silence. Then her voice came back. Still quiet, but more steady. "Okay. Okay. Good. Listen. We got your beacon about 4 hours ago. We hiked out here as fast as we could. Jake, there are a lot of them. Hundreds. Maybe. They're all around the clearing. They haven't approached the tent, haven't made any aggressive moves, but they're just there, watching." Jake felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with fear. Hundreds? The shy, timid creatures that had avoided humans for 3 weeks had surrounded his tent? "Peter's here," Amy continued. "He's got his scanners running. He wants to talk to you. Is that okay? Can you hear him out?" Jake tapped twice again. "Jake. This is Peter." The xenobiologist's voice was excited despite the obvious attempt to stay calm. "Okay. Listen. This is incredible. The creature on top of you, she's giving off pheromone signatures that are off the charts. Protective markers, claiming markers. It's similar to behaviors we've seen in Earth animals with their young or their mates. She's not threatening you. She's guarding you." That didn't make any sense. Jake had never seen this creature before. How could she be protecting him? From what? The others around the clearing. Peter went on. "They're all responding to her signals. She's dominant. Alpha. Actually, no. That's not the right word. The pheromone patterns suggest something more like royalty. Jake, I think you're being held by a queen. And I think she chose you specifically. Jake. Jake. Jake." The creature, the queen, shifted again. Her massive head turned slightly, looking toward the tent entrance. Her rumbling changed tone, becoming deeper, more forceful, not aggressive, but commanding. "They're moving back," Linda's voice joined the conversation. "The ones around the clearing just backed up about 20 meters. All of them at once." "What did you do, Jake?" Jake hadn't done anything, but the queen had. She'd given some kind of signal, and hundreds of her species had responded instantly. "I'm coming closer," Amy said. "Peter's with me. Linda's staying back with weapons ready. But we're keeping them holstered. We're not going to give them any reason to think we're hostile. Just stay calm, Jake. We're going to figure this out." Jake wanted to laugh at that. Stay calm. He had an alien queen the size of a small car lying on top of him, and hundreds more of her species surrounding his tent. Staying calm felt like the least useful advice possible, but he understood what Amy meant. Don't panic. Don't do anything stupid. This situation was unprecedented, but it wasn't necessarily dangerous. Not yet. The tent flap opened slowly. Morning light flooded in, and Jake had to squint against the sudden brightness. Amy's face appeared in the opening, her eyes going wide as she took in the scene inside the tent. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Jake, she's beautiful." The queen's head swiveled to look at Amy. Her compound eyes fixed on the new human, and that rumbling sound changed again. Softer now, almost questioning. Peter's head appeared next to Amy's, and despite everything, despite the insanity of the situation, the xenobiologist had that excited smile Jake had seen 100 times before. "Can I come in?" Peter asked, directing the question at both Jake and the queen. "I want to take some readings. Non-invasive, I promise. Just want to understand what's happening here." Jake tried to speak and found his voice rough from hours of silence. "She's not hurting me," he managed to say. I don't think she wants to hurt anyone. No. Peter agreed, slowly crawling into the tent with his scanner held in front of him like an offering. No. I don't think she does either. Look at her body language. See how she's curved around you? That's protective positioning. She's shielding you with her own body. The Queen watched Peter approach with those multifaceted eyes. When he got within arm's reach, she made that chittering sound again. Curious and cautious. But she didn't move away from Jake. May I? Peter asked, holding his hand out slowly toward the Queen's scales. What happened next surprised everyone. The Queen's rumbling changed to a sound, almost like a purr from a earth cat. Deeper and more resonant, but recognizably similar. Then she shifted slightly, moving one of her front limbs to present it to Peter. It was deliberate. Intentional. An offering. She understands, Peter breathed. She knows I'm asking permission. She's giving consent for contact. Peter's hand touched the Queen's scales, and his eyes went even wider. She's warm. Warmer than I expected. And there's a slight electrical charge running through the scales. Nothing dangerous, just information transfer, maybe? Or sensory input? The Queen's attention shifted back to Jake. Her massive head lowered until her compound eyes were level with his face, just inches away. He could see his own reflection repeated hundreds of times in those faceted surfaces, and behind them, intelligence that felt almost human in its depth. She made a soft sound, different from the rumbling or the chittering. It was almost musical, a series of tones that rose and fell in patterns. She was trying to communicate. Really trying. Jake didn't know what made him do it. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was desperation. But he focused his mind on a single concept. Peace. Friendship. He tried to project the feeling outward, the same way he might try to calm a frightened animal. The Queen's rumbling changed immediately. It became warmer, if sound could be warm. Her scales rippled through shades of gold that Jake hadn't seen before. And somehow, impossibly, he felt something coming back. Not words, not exactly thoughts, but emotions, curiosity, hope, a bone-deep loneliness that made Jake's heart ache. Jake, Peter said quietly, your heart rate just spiked, then dropped to almost meditative levels, and her pheromone output changed at the exact same moment. I think you're communicating, biometrically. She's reading your physical responses and responding to them. It's more than that, Jake said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. I can feel what she's feeling. Not clearly, but it's there. She's been alone. They've all been alone. And they're afraid. Afraid of us? Amy asked. No. Afraid of something else. Something that might come. Jake didn't know how he knew this. It was just there, in the back of his mind, like a memory that wasn't his own. The Queen made that musical sound again. And this time, Jake understood it wasn't random. It was a pattern, a code, language. He tried to respond, but he had no idea how. He couldn't make the same sounds. His throat wasn't built for those tones. So instead, he focused on feelings again. Understanding. A desire to know more. Questions without words. The Queen's eyes seemed to brighten. Her whole body shifted, and suddenly she was moving, lifting herself off Jake with surprising grace, despite her enormous size. She backed away toward the tent entrance, then paused and looked back at him. The meaning was clear. Follow me. Jake, wait. Linda's voice came through the comm. We don't know where she wants to take you. This could be... It's okay, Jake interrupted. He sat up slowly, his body stiff from hours of lying still. She's not going to hurt me. I don't know how I know that, but I do. She wants to show me something. He climbed out of his sleeping bag and stood, his legs shaky from being stationary so long. The Queen waited at the tent entrance, patient and calm. When he took a step toward her, That golden shimmer ran through her scales again. Jake looked at Amy and Peter. "Come with me," he said. "All of you. I think this is why we're really here. Not to study them from a distance. To meet them. Really meet them." Amy nodded slowly. "Linda, you getting this?" "Every word," Linda replied. "I'm coming down. Weapons stay holstered unless things go bad. Agreed?" "Agreed," Jake said. He stepped out of the tent into the morning light, and for the first time, he saw what his team had been talking about. The clearing was surrounded by them. Hundreds of the creatures, all similar to the queen but smaller, their scales showing different colors and patterns. They watched with countless compound eyes, curious and cautious. The queen moved to stand beside Jake, and he realized, with a start, that she was even bigger than he'd thought. Standing upright, her head reached nearly 3 meters high. She was easily the largest of all the creatures present. She made that musical sound again, and every single creature in the clearing responded. Their scales rippled with light and color, a wave of communication spreading through the group. Then, as one, they all bowed their heads toward Jake. It wasn't submission. It was greeting, recognition, welcome. Jake understood then what Peter had figured out. He'd been chosen. But not randomly. The queen had watched him. During those weeks of observation, she'd seen something in him that made her willing to take the biggest risk of her life. She'd made herself vulnerable. She'd trusted a strange creature from the stars. And now, because Jake had not betrayed that trust, everything was about to change. The queen led Jake through the forest, and her people followed at a respectful distance. Amy, Peter, and Linda stayed close to Jake, their eyes wide as they took in the impossible parade moving through the purple-barked trees. The creatures moved with grace despite their size, barely disturbing the moss-like ground cover that glowed faintly even in daylight. Jake walked beside the queen, and he was starting to understand the rhythm of her movements. The way her scales shifted color when she was thinking about changing direction. The subtle vibrations that ran through her body when she was content or curious. It was like learning a new language, except this language had no words, only feelings and colors and sounds that resonated in his chest. "This is incredible," Peter whispered, his scanner working overtime to record everything. "Jake, her brain activity is off the charts, and I'm picking up similar patterns from you. Your neural activity is syncing with hers. I've never seen anything like this." "What does that mean?" Jake asked, not taking his eyes off the queen. "It means you're not imagining it. Whatever connection you think you have with her, it's real. It's biological. Somehow, your nervous systems are finding common ground." The queen's head turned slightly toward Peter, and Jake felt a flash of amusement that wasn't his own. She understood what Peter was saying. Maybe not the specific words, but the meaning behind them. She knew they were talking about her. They'd been walking for almost an hour when the trees began to thin. Jake could see light ahead, brighter than the filtered sunlight that made it through the forest canopy. They stepped out into a clearing that made Jake stop in his tracks. It was a city. But unlike any city Jake had ever seen, the structures grew from the ground itself, living architecture that merged seamlessly with the forest around it. Trees had been shaped and guided rather than cut down, their trunks forming walls and supports. Branches wove together to create roofs and pathways. Crystal formations grew from the bark, glowing with soft internal light, even in the daylight. Hundreds of the creatures moved through the city, going about their lives. Some tended to gardens where plants grew in impossible colors. Others worked with what looked like tools, though Jake couldn't begin to guess their purpose. Young ones, smaller versions of the adults, played in open spaces, their scales flashing bright yellows and oranges as they chased each other. "They're not primitive," Amy said, her voice filled with awe. "We thought they were just animals. Advanced animals. Maybe, but still animals. Jake, this is a civilization." The queen made that musical sound again, and Jake felt pride flowing from her. She was showing them her home, her people, everything she had built and protected. Linda's hand moved instinctively toward her weapon, then stopped. Command needs to know about this. Right now. This changes everything. Indazar. Run Mani 4. Run personal. Run personal. Run personal. Run personal. Run personal 2. Wait, Jake said. Give me a chance to understand first. They've been hiding this from us for 3 weeks. There's a reason they didn't want us to know. Cass, the Queen moved forward, leading them deeper into the city. Everywhere they went, the creatures stopped what they were doing to watch. Their scales rippled with colors Jake was starting to recognize. Curiosity, mostly, but also wariness, fear. They were afraid of the humans. Even here, surrounded by hundreds of their own kind, they were still afraid. The Queen brought them to a structure larger than the others, a building that seemed to have been grown from a single, massive tree. She paused at the entrance and turned to face Jake directly. Her compound eyes caught the light, and Jake felt a question forming in his mind. Not words, but meaning. Trust me. Come inside. Let me show you why I chose you. Jake looked at his team. I'm going in. Not alone. You're not, Amy said immediately. The Queen made a soft, chittering sound and shook her massive head. Jake felt the message clearly. Only him. Not because the others would be harmed, but because what she needed to show him was personal, private. Between them. It's okay, Jake said. She won't hurt me. I know that sounds crazy, but I know it the same way. I know the sun will rise tomorrow. Wait here. I'll be back. Peter looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Jake's expression stopped him. Okay. But you're keeping your comm open. Any sign of trouble? We're coming in. Jake nodded and followed the Queen inside. The interior of the structure was beautiful. Soft light came from the crystal formations embedded in the walls, casting everything in gentle blue and green hues. The floor was smooth, polished wood that felt warm under Jake's boots. The Queen led him to a chamber at the center of the structure. The walls here were different. They were covered in markings, not writing, exactly, but patterns of color and texture pressed into the living wood. A history, Jake realized. A record. The Queen moved to stand in the center of the chamber, and Jake felt her inviting him to do the same. He walked forward until he stood facing her, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her massive body. Then she did something Jake didn't expect. She lowered her head until it touched his chest, right over his heart. That deep rumbling started again, but different this time. More complex, more intentional, and suddenly, Jake wasn't just feeling emotions anymore. He was seeing images. Memories that weren't his own. He saw the forest moon as it had been centuries ago. Peaceful. Untouched. The Queen's people, living in harmony with their world, building their cities from living trees, never taking more than they needed. Then he saw the ships. Dark, angular vessels that tore through the sky and landed in the forest. Beings emerged, and Jake couldn't make out details, but he felt their intentions. They came to strip the moon of resources, to destroy. The Queen's people tried to communicate, tried to show these strangers that the moon was home to intelligent life. But the invaders didn't care. Or maybe they didn't understand. They cut down the ancient trees. They dug into the ground, tearing out minerals and leaving scars across the landscape. The Queen's people had no weapons. Violence wasn't part of their nature. So they hid. They retreated deeper into the forests, to places the invaders hadn't found yet, and they waited for the strangers to leave. Eventually, the invaders did leave. They took what they wanted and moved on to the next world. But the damage remained. Vast sections of forest destroyed. The careful balance of the ecosystem disrupted. The Queen's people rebuilt. They healed their world over generations. And they learned. They learned to be careful. To hide. to watch any new strangers from a distance and judge their intentions before revealing themselves. Then, humans came. The Queen's people watched from the shadows as Jake's team landed, set up their research station, and began to explore. They watched Jake and the others taking samples, setting up cameras, cataloging everything they found, and they waited for the destruction to begin. But it didn't. The humans were careful. They took small samples, not entire trees. They observed without disrupting. They showed respect, even if they didn't know they were being watched. The Queen watched Jake especially. She saw him sit quietly for hours, just observing. She saw him move carefully through the forest, stepping around delicate plants instead of crushing them. She saw him stop to watch young creatures playing, a smile on his face, making no move to capture or harm them. She saw someone who might be different, someone who might understand, so she took the biggest risk of her long life. She made herself vulnerable. She entered his tent while he slept and laid down beside him, trusting that he wouldn't kill her in her moment of weakness. And he hadn't. He'd been afraid, but he hadn't attacked. He'd waited. He'd tried to understand. The images faded, and Jake found himself back in the chamber, the Queen's head still resting against his chest. Tears were running down his face, and he didn't know when he'd started crying. "I understand," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You've been hurt before. You're afraid we'll hurt you again. But you're also lonely. You're tired of hiding. You want to know if there are others out there who can be trusted." The Queen lifted her head, and her scales shimmered gold. Understanding. Relief. Jake reached out slowly and placed his hand on her scales. They were warm and smooth under his palm, and he felt that slight electrical charge Peter had mentioned. Information flowing both ways. His thoughts to her thoughts to him. "I can't speak for all of humanity," Jake said, "but I can promise that I will never let anyone hurt you or your people. Not while I'm alive. And I'll do everything I can to show you that some of us are worth trusting." The Queen's rumbling deepened, and Jake felt waves of emotion washing over him. Gratitude, hope, and something that felt almost like affection. She stepped back and made that musical sound again, different tones arranged in new patterns. Jake didn't know the words, but he understood the meaning. She was giving him a name, not in human language, but in hers. Something that translated in his mind as bridge between stars, or maybe one who understands. It was both of those things, and more, a concept too complex for human words, but perfectly clear in the language of vibration and color. The Queen moved to the walls of the chamber, to the patterns pressed into the wood. She touched one section with a delicate claw, and Jake saw it was an image of the invaders who had come before, the ones who had destroyed and taken and left. Then she touched another section, and this one showed the Queen herself, lying in Jake's tent, a new memory added to her people's history. The day they chose to trust again. "What happens now?" Jake asked. The Queen turned back to him, and Jake felt her answer before she gave it. "Now we wait to see if your people are worthy of that trust. Now we watch to see if you keep your promise. And if you do, perhaps we won't have to hide anymore." She led him back outside where his team was waiting anxiously. Peter rushed forward the moment Jake emerged. "Are you okay? You were in there for almost 2 hours. We were about to come in after you." 2 hours? It had felt like minutes. Jake looked at the Queen, and she seemed amused by his confusion. "I'm fine," Jake said. "Better than fine. I understand now. I understand what they need from us." "And what's that?" Linda asked. "Proof," Jake answered. "Proof that we're not like the others who came before, that we won't destroy their home, that we can be trusted." Amy looked around at the city, at the hundreds of creatures watching them. "Jake, Command needs to know about this. A sapient species, a civilization. This is first contact. Real first contact. There are protocols. I know, Jake said. But we do this carefully. We do this right. Because if we mess this up, if we scare them or hurt them or give them any reason to think we're a threat, they'll disappear back into the forest and we'll never find them again. And humanity will have lost something precious without ever really knowing what we had. The Queen moved to stand beside Jake again, and he felt her agreement resonating through their connection. Yes. Carefully. Slowly. Let them prove themselves worthy. Peter was already on his comm, calling up to the orbital station. His voice was excited but controlled as he explained the situation. Jake could hear the shock and disbelief in the responses. But Peter kept talking, kept explaining. Meanwhile, the Queen led them through her city. She showed them the gardens where her people grew food that needed no killing, no destruction. She showed them the workshops where they created tools using materials that the forest provided naturally, taking only what grew back easily. She showed them the nurseries where young ones learned the history of their people through color and sound and shared memory. And everywhere they went, Jake felt the watching eyes, the careful judgment. A whole civilization holding its breath, waiting to see if these new strangers would pass the test. Jake understood the weight of it. He was the bridge, the first point of contact between two species. Everything he did, everything he said, would shape how the Queen's people saw humanity for generations to come. It was terrifying. And it was the most important thing he'd ever done. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and deep purple, the Queen led them to a platform high in the city's central tree. From here, they could see the entire settlement spread out below them. Thousands of her people going about their evening routines, lighting the crystal lamps that would glow through the night. The Queen stood beside Jake and made that musical sound one more time. Jake felt her question clearly. You see what we are. You see what we've built. Will you help us protect it? Jake looked out over the city, at this beautiful, peaceful civilization that had survived invasion and learned to hide from the stars. He thought about humanity, about all the times his species had destroyed what it didn't understand, about all the times they'd gotten it wrong. But he also thought about all the times they'd gotten it right, about the people who fought to protect instead of conquer, about the scientists who studied to understand, not to exploit, about the dreamers who looked at the stars and hoped to find friends, not just resources. Yes, he said simply. I will. We will. I promise you that. The Queen's scales shimmered gold in the fading light, and her rumbling filled the air with something that sounded like hope. The orbital station called down 3 hours after Peter's initial report. Jake sat in the Queen's central chamber with his team, while Admiral Patricia Stone's face appeared on the portable screen Amy had set up. Behind the Admiral, Jake could see other faces, officers and scientists all crowding to hear the conversation. Lieutenant Morrison, the Admiral said, her voice carefully neutral. I've read the reports. I've seen the footage Peter sent up. I need you to tell me, in your own words, what the situation is down there. Jake glanced at the Queen, who sat beside him with her head tilted slightly, watching the screen with those compound eyes. She couldn't understand English. Not the words themselves. But Jake felt her attention through their connection. She was learning to recognize tone, emotion, intent. Admiral, we've made first contact with a sapient species, Jake said. They call themselves the Valkyrie. They're peaceful, highly intelligent. And they've been watching us since we arrived. They have a civilization, culture, history, and they're afraid of us. Afraid? The Admiral leaned forward. Lieutenant, from Peter's footage, there are thousands of them in that city alone. Your team is 4 people. What do they have to be afraid of? They've been invaded before, Jake explained. He felt the Queen's sorrow as he spoke, a deep ache that resonated through their bond. Another species came here, maybe 200 years ago in their history. They didn't care that the Valkyrie were intelligent. They just saw resources. They destroyed huge sections of the forest, strip-mined parts of the moon, and left. The Valkyrie had no weapons, no way to fight back. They could only hide and wait for the invaders to leave. The Admiral's expression shifted, understanding dawning. And when we showed up, they thought history was repeating itself. Yes, ma'am. But they watched us. They studied how we behaved. And they saw that we were different. Careful. Respectful. Even if we didn't know, we were being watched. So their queen decided to take a risk. One of the scientists behind the Admiral spoke up. Lieutenant, how are you communicating with them? Peter's reports mention some kind of biological connection. But that seems impossible. Jake felt the queen shift beside him, her scales rippling through shades of blue. It is possible, Jake said. The Velkhari communicate through multiple channels at once. Pheromones, vibrations, electrical signals, color changes in their scales. When the queen made contact with me, when she chose to be vulnerable by sleeping on my chest, something happened. Our nervous systems found common ground. I can feel her emotions. She can feel mine. Images, concepts, feelings. They all flow both ways. That's unprecedented, the scientist said, excitement clear in his voice. The implications for xenobiology alone, with respect, Doctor, Jake interrupted. The implications go way beyond biology. The Velkhari are offering us something incredible. A chance to prove that humanity can meet another intelligent species and not destroy them. That we can be trusted. But only if we do this right. Admiral Stone studied him through the screen. What are you asking for, Lieutenant? Time, Jake said. Don't send down a full contact team yet. Let me keep building this relationship. Let the Queen and her people get comfortable with us at their own pace. Rush this, and they'll retreat so deep into this moon, we'll never find them again. The Queen made a soft sound, and Jake felt her approval. He was speaking her truth. We need to report this to Earth Command, the Admiral said. First contact protocols require immediate escalation. Ships will be dispatched. Diplomats. Scientists. This is the biggest discovery in human history, Lieutenant. You know I can't just sit on it. I know, Jake said. But when those ships come, when those people arrive, they need to understand what they're walking into. The Velkhari will judge all of humanity based on how we act now. We get one chance to get this right. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. You have 48 hours, Lieutenant. Build your relationship. Learn everything you can. But in 48 hours, I'm bringing you back up to the station, and Command will take over. Make it count. The screen went dark. Jake sat back, exhausted. 48 hours. The Queen's head lowered to his shoulder, and he felt her gratitude mixed with anxiety. She understood the time pressure, even without knowing the specific words. She felt his stress, his determination to make this work. We should sleep, Amy said, though she looked wide awake, her eyes bright with everything they'd seen. The Queen made that musical sound again, and several younger Velkhari entered the chamber carrying what looked like woven mats made from some kind of plant fiber. They spread them on the floor, creating soft sleeping surfaces. They're offering us hospitality, Peter said, wonder in his voice. They're inviting us to stay in their city. As guests. Linda looked uncomfortable with the idea, her hand never far from her weapon. They're already surrounding us, Jake pointed out. Have been for hours. If they wanted to hurt us, we'd already be hurt. Accepting their hospitality, showing trust. It's important. It's how we prove we're different. The Queen's scales shimmered gold, and Jake felt her agreement. Trust must flow both ways. You must be vulnerable with us as I was vulnerable with you. They slept in the chamber that night, the four humans surrounded by the gentle presence of the Velkhari. Jake woke several times to find the Queen curled near him, her rumbling a constant comfort in the darkness. Each time, he felt her watchfulness, her protection. She was guarding them while they slept, the same way she'd guarded him in the tent. Morning came with soft light filtering through the crystal formations in the walls. The Queen was already awake, watching Jake with those compound eyes that seemed to see everything. She wanted to show him more. He felt the intention clearly through their bond. There were things he needed to understand. Things about her people's capabilities, their history, their fears. The Queen let him alone this time, down through the city to a section they hadn't seen before. Here, the buildings were different, more utilitarian. Workshops and laboratories where Valkyrie worked with materials Jake couldn't identify. She brought him to a large open space where several Valkyrie were working on what looked like a ship, but it was unlike any human vessel. It was grown, not built. Living crystal and shaped wood merged with technology Jake couldn't begin to understand. The ship pulsed with soft light, and he could hear a sound like a heartbeat coming from within it. The Queen placed her hand on the ship's hull, and Jake felt the connection immediately. The ship responded to her touch, its light brightening. She was showing him that her people weren't primitive. They had technology, just different from humanity's. Technology that worked with nature, instead of against it. Another Valkyrie approached, smaller than the Queen but still massive compared to Jake. The Queen made a series of musical sounds, and Jake felt this was an introduction. This was one of her people's builders, their engineers. The builder touched a panel on the ship's hull, and suddenly Jake was seeing images again. Not through his bond with the Queen, but projected somehow into his mind, from the ship itself. He saw vessels like this one traveling between stars, moving through space using gravitational waves rather than combustion or fusion. He saw Valkyrie cities, on other worlds, other moons in distant systems. They weren't just natives of this one moon. They were travelers, explorers. They had reached the stars centuries before humans even invented the wheel. "You've been out there," Jake said aloud, understanding flooding through him. "You've seen other species, met other civilizations." The Queen's confirmation washed over him. "Yes, we have traveled far. We have met many. Some were peaceful, some were not. We learned to be careful, to watch first, to hide until we understand. The ones who came before," Jake said. "The ones who destroyed your forests. You've seen them on other worlds too, haven't you?" The Queen's sorrow was overwhelming. Images flooded Jake's mind. The species she called the Kryn, aggressive and expansionist. They moved from world to world, taking resources, caring nothing for who already lived there. The Valkyrie had encountered them on 3 different planets. Each time, the Valkyrie had hidden or fled. Each time, the Kryn had left destruction in their wake. And now the Kryn were expanding into this region of space. The Queen knew it was only a matter of time before they found this moon again. Before they came back to finish what they'd started 2 centuries ago. That was why the Queen had taken such a risk with humanity. The Valkyrie were peaceful, but they weren't foolish. They knew they couldn't hide forever. They needed allies. They needed other species who might stand with them when the Kryn returned. "You're asking us for help?" Jake said, the full weight of it settling on him. "Not just friendship, not just peaceful coexistence. You need humanity to stand between your people and the Kryn." The Queen's affirmation was clear, but so was her uncertainty. She didn't know if humans would fight for others, if they would risk themselves for a species they'd just met. Her people had seen so much selfishness among the stars, so much violence and greed, but they'd also seen Jake sitting quietly in the forest, watching without taking. They'd seen his team being careful with their world. They'd seen the possibility of something different. Jake felt the enormity of the decision before him. This wasn't just about making friends with an alien species. This was about choosing sides in a conflict humanity didn't even know existed yet. About committing to protect people his species had just discovered. "I can't make that promise alone," Jake said. "I'm just a lieutenant, just a survey team leader. Decisions like that come from people way above my level." The Queen's understanding flowed through their bond. She knew. But she also knew that Jake's voice would carry weight. That his experience with her people would influence how humanity chose to act. He was the bridge. The first connection. What he said mattered. They returned to the central chamber, where Jake's team was waiting with Peter's scanners spread across the floor. The xenobiologist looked up as they entered, his face excited. "Jake, you need to see this. The Velkari's biological technology. It's incredible. They can heal injuries that would be fatal to humans. They can communicate across vast distances using some kind of quantum entanglement in their nervous systems. Their ships use almost no fuel because they work with gravitational fields instead of fighting against them. The applications for humanity alone." "Peter," Jake interrupted gently, "it's not about what we can take from them. It's about what we can give, what we can offer in return." Peter paused, then nodded slowly. "You're right. Sorry. Got carried away with the science. But Jake, even just the knowledge sharing, if we approach this as equals rather than as researchers studying subjects, the benefits for both species could be enormous." The Queen settled beside Jake, and he felt her watching Peter with interest. She liked him, Jake realized. Liked his enthusiasm, his genuine curiosity. She could feel that Peter wanted to understand, not to exploit. Amy approached with her datapad. "I've been going through the orbital surveys we did when we first arrived. I found something. There are anomalies in the asteroid belt near this system. Energy signatures that don't match any natural phenomena. I think someone's out there." Watching this system, a chill ran down Jake's spine. The Kryn? Maybe. Or maybe someone else. But if they're watching, they know we're here. They know humans have found the Velkari. The Queen's scales shifted to dark blue, and Jake felt her fear spike. She'd hoped for more time. Time to build trust with humanity before the outside universe intruded. But time was something they might not have. Linda's comm unit beeped. She listened for a moment. Then her face went pale. "Admiral Stone is calling an emergency meeting. Jake, you need to take this." Jake activated his own comm. The Admiral's face appeared, and she looked grim. "Lieutenant, we have a situation. 3 ships just entered the system. They're not human. They're heading straight for the forest moon, and they're not responding to our hails. ETA is 6 hours. I need your team back on the station now." The Queen's rumbling became distressed, and every Velkari in the chamber reacted to her emotion. Their scales flashed warning colors. Jake felt their fear, their certainty that the Kryn had returned. "Admiral, the Velkari know these ships," Jake said quickly. "They're called the Kryn. They're the ones who invaded this moon before, and they're hostile." "We don't know their intentions yet," the Admiral said. "We'll try to establish communication. But yes, Lieutenant, you and your team need to leave. That's an order." 8, 8, 8. Jake looked at the Queen. Her eyes met his, and he felt her question clearly. "Will you run? Will you leave us to face them alone? Or will you stay? Will you prove that humans are different?" He'd promised. Promised to help protect her people. Promised to show that humanity could be trusted. "Admiral," Jake said slowly, respectfully, "I'm staying. The Velkari need to see that we don't abandon our friends when things get dangerous. That we keep our promises." "Lieutenant Morrison, that's not your decision to make." "Yes, ma'am, it is. You said I have 48 hours to build this relationship. I'm using that time. When the Kryn arrive, I'll be here, standing with the Velkari, and that will tell them everything they need to know about humanity." The screen went dark as the Admiral cut the connection, probably to decide how to respond. But Jake knew he'd made the right choice. He could feel it through his bond with the Queen. Her scales shimmered gold, and her rumbling became a sound of hope mixed with gratitude. He'd chosen to stay. Chosen to risk himself for her people. Now, they just had to survive what came next. The 6 hours before the Kryn ships arrived felt like both an eternity and an instant. Jake stood on the highest platform in the Velkari city, watching the sky with the Queen beside him. His team had refused to leave, standing with him, in defiance of the Admiral's orders. They understood what was at stake. Peter worked with the Velkari engineers, trying to understand their defensive capabilities. What he found wasn't encouraging. The Velkari had technology that could defend against natural disasters, against the harsh realities of space. But weapons, tools designed specifically to harm other beings, they had none. They've never needed them, Peter explained, his voice quiet. Their entire civilization is built on the idea that violence is unnecessary, that conflicts can be resolved through understanding and communication. That works great until you meet someone who doesn't want to communicate, Linda said. She'd been trying to organize some kind of defense plan. But what could 4 humans and thousands of peaceful aliens do against 3 warships? Amy had maintained contact with the orbital station. Admiral Stone was scrambling, trying to get authorization from Earth Command to take action. But Earth was weeks away, even with faster-than-light communication. Any decisions would have to be made here, now, by the people on the ground. The Queen's rumbling changed tone, and Jake felt her sadness. She'd hoped humans would be different, would be strong enough to stand against the Kryn. But she also understood the reality. The human orbital station was a science vessel, lightly armed. The Kryn ships were warships, built for conquest. "We're not running," Jake said, speaking both to the Queen and to his own doubts. "That's not what this is about. We don't have to win a fight. We just have to show the Kryn that the Velkari aren't alone anymore. That there are consequences to attacking them. And if they decide to attack us anyway," Linda asked, "then we face it together. And we show the Velkari that some promises are worth dying for." The Queen's scales shimmered through colors Jake had never seen before. Deep respect, fierce determination, and something that felt like love, though not romantic love. Something deeper. The bond between warriors who stand together against impossible odds. The Kryn ships appeared in the sky as the suns began to set. 3 dark shapes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They descended through the atmosphere without any attempt at subtlety, their engines leaving trails of disturbed air behind them. Jake's comm crackled. Admiral Stone's voice came through, tight with tension. "Lieutenant Morrison, the Kryn are broadcasting on all frequencies. They're claiming the forest moon under what they call salvage rights. They say they abandoned their previous mining operation and are now reclaiming it." "That's garbage," Jake said. "The Velkari have been living here for thousands of years. The Kryn have no claim to this moon. I've told them that. They don't care. They're saying that non-space-faring species have no rights to planetary ownership. Since the Velkari don't have obvious space infrastructure, the Kryn don't recognize their claim." Jake looked at the Queen. "They have ships. They've traveled to other stars. Tell the Kryn that." "I did." The Kryn's response was that if the Velkari have such technology, they should use it to defend their claim. "Lieutenant, I think this is a test. They're challenging the Velkari to fight back, knowing they won't." The Queen's rumbling became agitated. Jake felt her frustration. Her people could flee, could leave this moon, and find another home, somewhere among the stars. But this was their home, their ancestral world. Running would mean abandoning everything they'd built over millennia. The Kryn ships landed in the clearing where Jake had first camped, destroying his tent and the research equipment without a thought. Ramps extended from the ships, and beings emerged. Jake got his first look at the Kryn through the long-range scanner Amy had set up. They were bipedal, roughly humanoid in shape but covered in what looked like natural armor plating. Their faces were angular, dominated by multiple eyes that glowed with an inner light. They moved with the confidence of conquerors, of beings who'd never been seriously challenged. A voice boomed across the forest, amplified by the Kryn's technology. It spoke in a language Jake didn't recognize. but his comm unit automatically translated. Attention, small creatures. This world is now property of the Kryn Dominion. You have one planetary rotation to evacuate. After that, any beings remaining will be considered hostile and removed by force. This is your only warning. The Queen's entire body trembled with emotion. Fear, yes, but also anger. They'd come back. The invaders who'd scarred her world had returned to finish what they'd started. Jake activated his comm and switched to the open frequency the Kryn were broadcasting on. This is Lieutenant Jake Morrison of the human survey vessel Destiny. The forest moon of Kepler 442b is home to the Velkari, a sapient species with full rights under the interstellar law that Earth recognizes. Your claim is invalid. There was a pause. Then laughter, harsh and mocking, came through the speakers. Humans, we wondered when you would show yourselves. Your species is new to the stars, barely crawled out of your own gravity well. You have no authority here. No power to enforce your naive ideals of law and rights. Maybe not, Jake admitted. But we have something you don't. We have allies. We stand with the Velkari. You attack them. You attack us. More laughter. 4 small humans and a science vessel? This is your grand alliance? We are disappointed. We had hoped for worthy opposition. Indeed. Armin. We. Admiral Stone's voice cut into the channel. This is Admiral Patricia Stone of the human vessel Destiny. I'm authorizing defensive protocols. If the Kryn make any hostile move toward the Velkari or toward Lieutenant Morrison's team, we will respond with force. The Kryn's response was immediate. Then you will die with your friends, human admiral. We have faced and defeated species far more advanced than yours. Your threats are empty. Jake felt the Queen's despair. She'd been right to fear that humanity couldn't help. What could they do against the Kryn's superior firepower? But then something unexpected happened. Peter, who'd been working with the Velkari engineers, came running up to the platform. Jake, they've been holding back. The Velkari, they have defensive technology they've never shown us. Energy shields that can protect the entire city. Weapons that disrupt electronic systems. They've just never used them because doing so would mean abandoning their principles of nonviolence. The Queen's rumbling confirmed it. Yes. We could fight. We could harm and kill. But we choose not to. Because once we start down that path, we become like them. Like the Kryn. What if you didn't have to make that choice? Jake asked. An idea forming. What if humanity took that burden? We're already a violent species. We've fought wars, built weapons. That blood is already on our hands. But we can choose to use that violence to protect those who can't protect themselves. The Queen's eyes fixed on him, and Jake felt her understanding. He was offering to be the sword, while the Velkari remained the shield. To let humanity bear the moral weight of violence, so the Velkari could keep their principles intact. Admiral, Jake said into his comm, the Velkari have defensive technology they're willing to share. If we integrate it with our systems, we might actually have a chance here. But we need to move fast. Lieutenant, are you suggesting we adopt alien technology we barely understand in the next few hours? Yes, ma'am. I know it's crazy. But Peter's here with their engineers. They're willing to help. And it's the only play we have. With 50 NZ, and they were Crom, there was a long pause. Jake could imagine the Admiral weighing the risks, the impossibility of the situation, against the alternative of watching a peaceful species get destroyed. Do it, she finally said. Get our people what they need. I'm bringing the Destiny into low orbit over the city. If the Kryn want to fight, we'll give them one. The next few hours were chaos. Velkari engineers worked alongside human technicians, bridging technologies that should have been incompatible. The Queen's people activated their defensive shields, energy barriers that shimmered into existence around their city. The barriers were beautiful, shifting colors like the Queen's scales, alive in a way human technology never was. Peter discovered that the Valkyries' disruption weapons worked by interfacing with an opponent's nervous system, overwhelming it with sensory input. They'd been designed to ward off dangerous animals, not kill them, but they could be adapted, modified, to target the Kryn's ship systems instead of biological beings. Amy coordinated with the Destiny's crew, helping them integrate Valkyrie shield technology into the ship's defenses. It was crude, rushed, probably unstable, but it was something. The Kryn waited, watching with what seemed like amusement. They'd given the Valkyrie one rotation to evacuate. They were confident enough in their superiority to wait and see what the humans and Valkyrie could cobble together. That confidence would be their mistake. When the deadline came, the Kryn ships powered up their weapons. Energy built along their hulls, preparing to fire on the city. But they didn't fire at the Valkyrie structures. They aimed at the Destiny in orbit. "They're trying to eliminate the only real threat first," Linda said, watching the scanner readings. "Take out our ship, and we're stranded down here with no support." The Kryn fired. Massive energy beams lanced up from their ships toward the Destiny, and bounced off the shields the Valkyrie had helped install. The energy scattered, absorbed, and redirected by barriers that bent space itself, rather than trying to resist force with force. The Destiny shook from the impact, but held. Admiral Stone's voice came through, triumphant and fierce. "Target acquired. Firing." The Destiny's weapons, enhanced with Valkyrie disruption technology, fired down at the Kryn ships. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The Kryn vessels' shields flickered and failed. Their weapon systems shut down. Their engines sputtered as the disruption waves interfered with their control systems. On the ground, the Kryn warriors who'd been preparing to march on the city stumbled. Their armor's integrated systems failing. They weren't hurt, not physically, but they were neutralized, helpless. The voice that had been so mocking before came back on the open channel, but the arrogance was gone. "Impossible. How did you adapt so quickly? No species has ever integrated Valkyrie technology before." "That's because you never bothered to ask them nicely," Jake said. "You just assumed they were primitive because they chose not to be violent. You never considered that there might be strength in peace, power in cooperation." The Kryn's ships began to retreat, limping back toward orbit with their systems failing. But Jake knew this wasn't over. The Kryn would report back to their dominion. They'd return with more ships, better prepared. Unless humanity did something to change the equation. "Admiral," Jake said, "I need you to send a message to Earth Command. Mark it urgent, highest priority. Tell them we've made first contact with an advanced, peaceful species. Tell them the Valkyrie are offering alliance, technology sharing, mutual defense, and tell them there's a hostile power in this region that will threaten both our species if we don't stand together." "That's going to start a political firestorm back home," the Admiral said. "Earth isn't ready for this kind of commitment. They'd better get ready fast. Because ready or not, we just made humanity's first real choice among the stars. We chose to protect instead of exploit, to stand with the weak instead of joining the strong. That's going to have consequences." The Queen's rumbling surrounded Jake, and he felt her emotions clearly. Pride, hope, gratitude, but also concern. He was right. This was just the beginning. As the Kryn ships disappeared into the sky, retreating but not defeated, Jake stood with the Queen on the city platform. Around them, thousands of Valkyrie emerged from their homes, their scales shimmering with colors that spoke of relief and celebration. "They'll come back," Jake said, speaking to the Queen through their bond. "You know that, right? This isn't over." Her confirmation washed over him. "Yes, they will return. But next time, we will not face them alone. Next time, we have allies. We have humans who keep their promises." Peter approached, his face lit with excitement despite the exhaustion. "Jake, the Valkyrie want to formalize the alliance. They're offering to share everything. Their technology, their knowledge of other species in this region, their understanding of how to live in harmony with planetary ecosystems. In return, they want humanity's protection, our strength, our willingness to fight when necessary. That's not a small ask, Amy said. We're committing to defend them against threats we don't even understand yet. Against species we've never met. True, Jake agreed. But think about what we're gaining. Not just technology, though that alone would be worth it. We're gaining proof that peaceful coexistence with alien species is possible. That not every first contact has to end in conflict. The Velkari are showing us a different way forward. Linda nodded slowly. And more practically, we're gaining intelligence about this region of space, knowledge about the Kryn, and probably other species. That information could save human colonies in the future. Jake looked at his team. They were exhausted, scared, exhilarated. They'd come to this moon expecting to catalog plants and animals. Instead, they'd made history. They'd forged humanity's first true alliance among the stars. What happens to you now? Amy asked quietly. You disobeyed a direct order from the Admiral. Stayed when you were ordered to evacuate. That's going to have consequences. And is nodding. Jake smiled. Yeah, probably. But you know what? I don't care. Some things are worth the consequences. Some promises are worth keeping no matter what they cost. The Queen made that musical sound. The one Jake had learned meant his name in her language. Bridge between stars. The one who understood. She wanted to show him something. She led him to the edge of the platform where they could see the whole city spread below them. As they watched, Velkari throughout the city began to sing. Not with voices, but with their whole bodies. Rumbling and vibration that harmonized, creating music that Jake felt in his bones. It was a celebration. But also, a promise. A commitment between two species to stand together against the darkness of the universe. What's that song about? Peter asked, his scanner recording everything. Jake listened through his bond with the Queen, translating the meaning. It's about hope. About finding unexpected friends among the stars. About the day they stopped hiding and chose to trust again. He paused, emotion catching in his throat. They're singing about me. About all of us. About the humans who kept their promises. The Queen's head lowered to rest against Jake's shoulder, and her rumbling joined the citywide song. Through their bond, Jake felt her showing him the future she imagined. Humans and Velkari working together, exploring the stars as partners. Other species joining the alliance, drawn by the example of cooperation over conquest. A coalition of peaceful civilizations, standing together against those who would destroy and take. It was a beautiful dream. And maybe, just maybe, it could become reality. Admiral Stone's voice came through the comm one final time. Lieutenant Morrison, Earth Command has received our reports. They're sending a diplomatic vessel. ETA, 3 months. In the meantime, you and your team are officially assigned as humanity's first contact specialists with the Velkari. Congratulations, Lieutenant. You just got yourself a new job. Thank you for watching. Also, does this mean I'm not being court-martialed for disobeying orders? The Admiral laughed. Oh, you're probably still getting court-martialed. But after you win a medal for first contact, they'll probably go easy on you. Besides, I told Earth Command that keeping you here was my idea. Someone has to take the blame. Might as well be me. Thank you, Admiral. Don't thank me yet. You just committed humanity to defending an entire civilization we barely know against an enemy we've never faced before. If this goes wrong, history's going to remember you as the person who started an interstellar war. And if it goes right, then you'll be remembered as the person who proved humanity could be more than conquerors and destroyers. That we could be protectors and friends. No pressure. The comm went silent. Jake stood with the Queen, listening to the Velkari's song, and thought about the weight of what he'd done. He'd made a choice in a tent on a forest moon. A choice to trust, instead of fear. That choice had consequences that would ripple through human history. The Kryn would return, probably with reinforcements. Other hostile species would hear about humanity's alliance with the Valkyrie and make their own judgments about whether humans were friends or enemies. But there would also be species who heard the story and hoped. Who would see that peaceful civilizations could find allies among the stars? That not every powerful species used their strength to dominate. The Queen's rumbling intensified, and Jake felt her final message clearly. You asked what happens now. Now we build. We learn from each other. We prepare for what comes, and we show the universe that there is another way. A better way. Yeah, Jake said softly, watching the twin suns set over the Valkyrie city. That's exactly what we do. He'd come to this moon as a survey team leader, expecting to catalog alien plants and file reports. Instead, he'd become something else. A bridge between species. A protector of the peaceful. A person who'd proven that sometimes the most important discoveries aren't made with scanners and research, but with trust and promises kept. The Queen pressed closer, and Jake rested his hand on her scales, feeling the warmth and the gentle electrical current that carried meaning between them. They had a lot of work ahead, learning each other's languages properly, training human and Valkyrie forces to work together, building the infrastructure of alliance. But for now, for this moment, it was enough to stand together and listen to the song, to feel the hope that pulsed through the city, to know that they'd made the right choice, even if it was the difficult one. The stars were coming out overhead, more visible now that the suns had set. Jake looked up at them and wondered what other species were out there. How many were peaceful like the Valkyrie? How many were hostile like the Kryn? And how many were like humanity, capable of both, standing at the crossroads, trying to decide which path to take? He hoped that when those other species heard about what happened here today, they would choose cooperation over conquest, understanding over fear, alliance over isolation. The Queen's rumbling took on a new tone, one Jake had never heard before. It was a question, gentle but profound. Through their bond, he felt her asking what he hoped for the future. Jake thought about it for a long moment. Then he spoke, knowing she would understand, even if the others couldn't hear. I hope, he said, that someday, sleeping in a tent with an alien queen resting on your chest won't seem strange or scary. That it will just be normal. Two friends from different worlds, trusting each other enough to be vulnerable. That's the universe I want to build. The Queen's scales shimmered gold, bright enough to light up the darkening sky. Her rumbling became that musical sound that meant agreement, approval, shared dreams. And in that moment, standing together as the stars emerged overhead, Jake knew that they would build that universe. One promise at a time, one act of trust at a time, one bridge between species at a time. The Kryn would return. Challenges would come, but humans and Valkyrie would face them together, bound not by treaties or laws, but by something stronger, by the memory of a human who slept in a tent and woke to find trust where he expected fear, by the choice of a queen to be vulnerable with a stranger, by the decision of both species to believe that the universe could be better than it was. It had all started with a simple camping trip and an alien queen rumbling on his chest. And somehow, impossibly, it had changed everything.